Hi, uh, this is Xingyu, and here's my response for our final quiz for class AFAS 375 with Dr. Brian Carter. I'll be talking about Harlem Renaissance from beginning to end. So, Harlem Renaissance, which often referred as the New Negro movement, was a unique historical period where arts, literature, and culture originated from African American artists and entertainers. So it took place mainly from World War One to mid 1930s and happened mostly in New York City, Harlem. So the background of Harlem Renaissance was slavery ended right after Civil War, and majority of blacks started to seek civil rights, freedom, and social participation. However, due to the pressure of the democratic whites from the South, African Americans began to migrate to North in large numbers. Therefore, Harlem became the center of African Americans and attracted numerous immigrants from the South. And many scholars believe that the official start of Harlem Renaissance set stage on 1917, where they held the Civil Banquet Club, where both white and black publishers agreed to work together. After 1917, it was the age of blues and jazz. It became a worldwide sensation. Many believe that black music provided the pulse of Harlem Renaissance, and most artistic creations were based on the music. Beginning with the recording of Crazy Blues in 1920, this form of music was new to everybody and soon spread across the whole America. Writers such as Langston Hughes, Sterling Brown, and Jane Toomer saw blues as an art equivalent with the spirituals. After blues, the jazz came right after. Louis Armstrong was the very first jazz player. Therefore, later on, the popularity of jazz among whites helped jazz to start a Negro vogue in cities such as New York. The first notable person of Harlem Renaissance was Carl Van, a white man who spread out the black music culture. He was considered as an inside guide into the Harlem Renaissance, where he mostly focusing on the exotic parts of Harlem, but also brings out the frustration of new rising black artists and what struggles they had to go through. So, speaking of Langston Hughes, he was the most prolific writer of Harlem Renaissance during that time, where Hughes casted off the influences of white poets and wrote with mostly blues and jazz. First, his works, which called "The Negro Speaks of Rivers," was first published in the Crisis in 1921, which became Hughes' most significant poem. It was collected in his first book, called "The Weary Blues" in 1926. His first and last published poems appeared also in the Crisis, and most of his poems were published in Crisis uh, than any other journals. His life and works were very influential during the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, where alongside with his contemporaries Zora Neale Hurston, Wallace Thurman, Claudie McKay, especially Claudie McKay, they worked together to create a magazine called Fire. So as we move into the 1921, it was Blake and Noble Cecil's music revenue which set a model for black musicians and continued to inspire others for the rest of the century. During this time, blacks see art as a solution not only to settle the conflict politically since the Ku Klux Klan was at its peak, but also seek understanding of their own position in society. After the Jazz Age, a number of black writers stood out to seek attention at the liberal civil club banquet, where the New Negro, an interpretation aided by Alan Locke, was sold exceptional well and inspired many other black writers. Such Conte Colin, a friend of Locke, believed that one's racial background should not determine one's artistic heritage, and that the accomplishment of black writers belong to American heritage as much as other white writers. These books, published by black writers, were mainly focusing on the struggle of how African Americans in the society back then, and how the struggle of some blacks tried to blend into other societies. Some of the most notable people that we haven't talked about during the class were Bennett. His poetry was published in the NAACP's The Crisis magazine and Alan Locke's New Negro. She also published the short stories Wedding Day and Tokens in the mid-1920s and worked as a publisher in New York at that time. So, furthermore, Arna Bontemps was a writer and teacher. The novel he published back in 1931, which was called God Sent Sunday, which tells the story of the rise and fall of a black St. Louis jockey in the 1890s. The book tale was inspired by the life of the author's favorite uncle, Buddy, and this character was the first character that was based on black character, and the novel was the first novel that was developed around black characters. Literature during Harlem Renaissance were rather very colorful. They were widely ranged from women's rights to homosexuality, and also ideas such as passing. The key of this movement is to bring out a new identity for African Americans and a new identity in every category of our society. The idea of passing, which means that a black person with possibly mixed heritage could be blended into societies rather than his own. However, back in that time, if a African American were found to be passing, the punishment was unbelievable. So, many novels which describe the idea of passing resulted feelings of exclusion, and it was portrayed by authors as depression, desperation. Moreover, such as alcoholism, sexual perversion, and attempts at suicide. So lastly, the legacy of Harlem Renaissance opened many doors and deeply influenced many generations of African American writers that followed. So and that's all I have to tell about Harlem Renaissance. Thank you.